3 weeks ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was. Today, I'm not so sure. Because a little girl I had never met ran across a crowded grocery store, threw her arms around me, and called me mommy. At first, I laughed. 10 minutes later, I was shaking. An hour later, I was questioning everything I had ever been told about my family. And before the month was over, DNA results would reveal a secret someone had spent decades trying to keep buried. If that little girl had never walked into that store, I would have gone the rest of my life believing a lie. But she did. And what happened next changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind that feels completely ordinary while you're living it. The sky was gray, and a light drizzle tapped against the windows of the grocery store as I pushed my cart through the produce section. I had just finished a long shift at work and was trying to decide whether I wanted chicken or pasta for dinner. Nothing about that day felt unusual. Nothing hinted that my life was about to split into a before and after. I remember reaching for a bag of apples when I heard small footsteps running across the floor. At first, I ignored them. Kids ran through stores all the time. Then I heard a little voice scream something. Mommy. The word echoed through the aisle. I glanced up automatically, expecting to see a child running toward another woman nearby. Instead, a little girl with dark curls came charging straight at me. Before I could react, she wrapped her tiny arms around my waist. Mommy, she cried again. The apple slipped from my hand and rolled across the floor. For a second, I just stood there frozen. I looked around, expecting someone to come running after her. No one did. The little girl squeezed me tighter. I found you, she said through tears. My stomach dropped. I gently touched her shoulders. Sweetheart, I think you've got the wrong person. She immediately shook her head. No. You're my mommy. Her voice cracked. The emotion in her face didn't look confused. It looked relieved. As if she had finally found someone she had been searching for. People nearby had started watching. A middle-aged woman pushing a cart stopped completely. An elderly man stared over the top of a cereal display. Even the cashier at the end of the aisle was looking in our direction. I felt heat rush into my face. The little girl couldn't have been older than 6. Her cheeks were flushed from crying. And she refused to let go. Honey, I said softly, kneeling down. What's your name? Lily. Okay, Lily. Where's your mom? Her lower lip trembled. You. The answer hit me harder than it should have. I forced a smile. No, sweetheart. I'm not your mommy. Tears immediately filled her eyes. Yes, you are. The conviction in her voice made my chest tighten. Then something strange happened. I really looked at her. Not just as a lost child. I studied her face. And a chill ran through my body. Her eyes were green. So were mine. That alone meant nothing. But then I noticed the shape of her nose. The slight dimple in her chin. The way her eyebrows curved upward near the ends. Features that looked disturbingly familiar. I suddenly remembered an old photograph of myself at about the same age. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it. Yet the feeling wouldn't go away. Lily reached up and touched my face. Her hand was trembling. I knew you'd come back. The words sent a cold shiver down my spine. What do you mean? I asked. She opened her mouth to answer. Then her eyes widened. She was staring at something behind me. A man's voice suddenly cut through the aisle. Lily. I turned. A tall man was hurrying toward us. His face looked pale. Panicked. And the moment his eyes landed on me, he stopped so abruptly that his shopping basket nearly slipped from his hand. The color drained from his face. For several seconds, he didn't say a word. He simply stared. As if he had seen a ghost. My heart began pounding. Something about the expression on his face felt wrong. Very wrong. He wasn't looking at a stranger who had accidentally attracted a lost child. He was looking at someone he recognized. Or thought he recognized. "Lily," he said quietly. The little girl tightened her grip around me. "No." The man swallowed hard. Then he looked directly into my eyes. And what he said next made every hair on my arms stand up. "Oh my God." His voice barely came out as a whisper. "You look exactly like her." And in that moment, I knew this wasn't a simple mistake. Not even close. For a moment, nobody moved. The grocery store seemed to disappear around us. I could still hear shopping carts rolling somewhere in the distance and the faint music playing through the speakers overhead, but everything felt strangely muted. My entire attention was locked on the man standing a few feet away. And his attention was locked on me. Lily still had her arms wrapped around my waist. The man's face had gone completely pale. He looked as though he had just witnessed something impossible. "I'm so sorry," he finally said, forcing himself to move forward. "Lily, sweetheart, come here." "No." She clung to me even tighter. The man closed his eyes briefly. Embarrassment and frustration flashed across his face. But underneath those emotions, I saw something else. Fear. Real fear. "Please," he said gently. "Come here." Lily shook her head. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I found Mommy." The man's jaw tightened. Several shoppers were openly staring now. I felt uncomfortable standing in the center of the aisle like part of some public drama. "It's okay," I told him. "She probably just got confused." The words sounded reasonable. But even as I said them, I wasn't entirely convinced. Because I couldn't stop noticing the similarities. The more I looked at Lily, the more unsettled I became. It wasn't just one feature. It was dozens of little things. The shape of her smile. The way she tilted her head when she spoke. Even the tiny freckle near her left eyebrow. I had that exact freckle. The man seemed to notice me studying her. His expression darkened. Then he looked away. That reaction didn't make me feel any better. After several more minutes of gentle persuasion, Lily finally released me. The moment she stepped away, she looked devastated. Like someone had taken away something precious. The sight broke my heart. The man took her hand. Again, he looked at me. And again, that strange expression appeared. Shock. Confusion. Disbelief. "I'm really sorry," he said. "It's okay." "No," he replied quietly. "You don't understand." The words hung between us. Something about his tone made my stomach twist. Before I could respond, he glanced at Lily. Then back at me. It looked like he was debating whether to say something. Finally, he sighed. "Can I buy you a coffee?" I blinked. "What?" I know this sounds strange. Very strange. A nervous laugh escaped him. "Trust me." "I know." He rubbed the back of his neck. "But after what just happened, I think we should talk." Every instinct told me to walk away. Normal people didn't accept coffee invitations from strangers whose children mistook them for their mother. But this situation had stopped feeling normal the moment Lily hugged me. And I couldn't shake the feeling that answers were sitting right in front of me. "I have questions too," I admitted. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in a small coffee shop across the street. Lily sat beside her father eating a chocolate muffin. Every few seconds, she glanced at me. Not in the way children usually look at strangers. In the way children look at someone they know. Someone they trust. The feeling made me increasingly uneasy. "My name is Claire," I said. The man nodded. "Daniel." We shook hands. His grip felt weak. Like his mind was somewhere else. He kept studying my face. Eventually I couldn't take it anymore. "Okay," I said. "Let's start with the obvious question." Daniel nodded. Fair. Why did your daughter think I was her mother? A shadow crossed his face. For several seconds he didn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded tired. Because she's been asking about her mother for years. I glanced at Lily. She was quietly picking chocolate crumbs off her plate. Where is her mother? Daniel looked down at the table. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. I don't know. A chill ran through me. What do you mean you don't know? His eyes lifted. Exactly what I said. The sadness in his expression felt genuine. Lily's biological mother disappeared 6 years ago. I stared at him. Disappeared? He nodded slowly. One day she was there. His voice cracked slightly. The next day she was gone. The cafe suddenly felt colder. Did the police investigate? 4 months. What happened? They never found her. I felt my heart sink. Nothing? Nothing. Lily looked up. The conversation had clearly reached familiar territory. Daddy says Mommy loved me. Daniel smiled sadly. She did. The little girl returned to her muffin. I noticed Daniel watching her. There was pain in his eyes. The kind that comes from carrying grief for a long time. Then he looked back at me. And said something that made my pulse quicken. What's your birthday? I frowned. What? Your birthday. I hesitated. Then I told him. The moment I finished speaking, Daniel's eyes widened. The coffee cup nearly slipped from his hand. For a second, he looked genuinely shaken. What? I asked. He swallowed hard. Lily's mother had the same birthday. I stared at him. A strange silence settled over the table. Coincidence. It had to be coincidence. Millions of people shared birthdays. Yet the timing felt unsettling. Daniel seemed equally disturbed. That's impossible, he murmured. What is? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his wallet. My heartbeat accelerated. Slowly, he pulled out an old photograph. The picture looked worn from years of handling. Daniel stared at it for a moment. Then slid it across the table. I looked down. And my breath caught in my throat. The woman in the photograph looked almost exactly like me. Not identical. But close enough to make my blood run cold. Same green eyes. Same dark hair. Same smile. The resemblance was undeniable. My hand started shaking. Who is this? Daniel's voice was barely above a whisper. Lily's mother. I couldn't breathe. The photograph felt impossible. Like someone had taken a picture of me years ago without my knowledge. I looked from the image to Daniel. Then back again. This isn't funny. I know. This has to be some kind of mistake. Daniel nodded slowly. That's what I've been telling myself since the moment I saw you. My pulse thundered in my ears. Nothing about this made sense. Absolutely nothing. Then something caught my attention. A detail so small I almost missed it. I brought the photograph closer. The woman was wearing a necklace. An old silver pendant. My stomach instantly dropped. Because I owned that exact necklace. Not a similar one. The exact same design. I had inherited it from my mother when I was a teenager. According to my parents, it had belonged to my grandmother. I touched the chain around my neck. I was wearing it right now. Daniel followed my gaze. Then his eyes widened. For several seconds neither of us spoke. The blood drained from my face. Where did she get this necklace? I whispered. Daniel stared at me. What? My voice shook. This pendant. I held it up. His expression changed immediately. Shock. Pure shock. The color vanished from his face. Because the necklace in the photograph and the necklace around my neck were identical. And suddenly, for the very first time, a terrifying thought entered my mind. What if this wasn't a coincidence? What if somehow my family was connected to hers? And if that was true, why had nobody ever told me? The answer would begin revealing itself later that night. Hidden inside a dusty box in my parents' attic. A box someone had spent 27 years making sure I never found. I barely remember the drive home. The entire way, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Every red light felt endless. Every minute gave my mind more time to replay what had happened. Lily's face. Daniel's reaction. The photograph. The necklace. And that impossible resemblance. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, I felt physically sick. I sat in my car for nearly 10 minutes staring at nothing. Part of me wanted to forget everything. To convince myself it was all some bizarre coincidence. But another part of me couldn't let it go. Because deep down, I already knew something wasn't right. I had spent 27 years believing I knew my family history. Now, for the first time, cracks were appearing in that story. And once you notice cracks, it's impossible to stop looking at them. That night, I called my mother. "Mom?" "Hi, sweetheart." Her voice sounded cheerful. Normal. The same voice I had heard my entire life. But somehow, it felt different now. "I need to ask you something." A pause. "Okay." I took a deep breath. "Did our family ever know someone named Rachel?" Silence. Just silence. It lasted only a few seconds. But it felt much longer. "No," she finally said. The answer came too quickly. Too carefully. My stomach tightened. "Why?" I hesitated. Then I told her everything. The grocery store. The little girl. The photograph. The necklace. The resemblance. As I spoke, my mother's breathing changed. By the end of the story, she sounded nervous. Very nervous. When I finished, she didn't respond immediately. "Mom? That's strange." The words sounded forced. Like she had rehearsed them. "Can I come over?" I asked. Another pause. Then, "Tomorrow would be better." "No. Tonight." The silence that followed told me everything. She didn't want me there. Which only made me more determined to go. An hour later, I was standing outside my parents' house. The same house where I grew up. The same house where every childhood memory lived. Yet as I stared at it now, something felt different. For the first time, it didn't feel completely familiar. It felt like a place holding secrets. My father answered the door. The moment he saw my face, his smile disappeared. "Claire." I walked inside. My mother was sitting on the couch. The instant she saw the photograph in my hand, her face went pale. I noticed it immediately. So did she. Because she quickly looked away. My heartbeat accelerated. "Mom." She swallowed. "Yes?" I placed the photograph on the coffee table. The room became silent. Neither of my parents touched it. Neither looked directly at it. That was my first real answer. People don't avoid looking at strangers. People avoid looking at things they recognize. "Who is she?" I asked. My father sighed. My mother stared at the floor. Neither answered. The silence felt deafening. "Who is she?" I repeated. My voice was louder this time. Still nothing. Then I pulled the necklace from around my neck. The silver pendant caught the light. My mother's eyes instantly filled with panic. And in that moment, I knew. She recognized it. "Mom." Her hands started trembling. "Where did this necklace come from?" "You know where it came from." "No." I shook my head. That's the problem. For 27 years, I had accepted every explanation they gave me. Now I wanted proof. Real proof. Not stories. Not excuses. Truth. My father finally spoke. Claire, some things are complicated. I laughed bitterly. That's what people say when they're hiding something. His face fell. Because he knew I was right. The room felt heavier by the second. Then my mother suddenly stood up. I need some air. Before anyone could stop her, she hurried toward the kitchen. I watched her leave. Then I looked at my father. Tell me what's going on. He rubbed his face. For the first time in my life, he looked old. Exhausted. Defeated. But instead of answering, he simply said, "Please stop digging." The words hit me like a slap. Because innocent people don't tell you to stop looking. They help you find answers. My father was afraid of something. And I intended to find out what. That night, after they went to bed, I couldn't sleep. I stayed in my childhood bedroom staring at the ceiling. Around 2 in the morning, I made a decision. I was going into the attic. The attic had always been off limits growing up. My father kept old boxes there. Tax records. Family keepsakes. Random junk. At least that's what I had always been told. Now I wasn't so sure. Using my phone as a flashlight, I climbed the narrow stairs. Dust floated through the darkness. The air smelled old. Forgotten. The attic was packed with boxes. Most were labeled. Christmas decorations. Old clothes. Books. But one box stood out immediately. It sat alone in the corner. No label. No markings. And unlike everything else, it had a small lock. My pulse quickened. Why lock a box in an attic? Unless there was something inside you didn't want anyone finding. I searched nearby and eventually found a small key taped beneath an old shelf. The discovery felt almost too easy. As if someone had hidden it long ago and forgotten it existed. My hands trembled as I unlocked the box. Inside were dozens of photographs. Old documents. Hospital papers. And several sealed envelopes. I pulled out the photographs first. The moment I saw them, my entire world shifted. Because the woman from Daniel's photograph appeared again. Over and over. Different ages. Different places. Different years. And in every picture, she looked remarkably like me. My chest tightened. Then I found something even worse. One photograph showed the woman holding a newborn baby. Written on the back was a date. My birth date. The room started spinning. No. My voice came out as a whisper. I flipped the photo over again. Same date. Same handwriting. Same woman. Holding a newborn. A newborn that could only be me. My hands began shaking uncontrollably. Suddenly, nothing made sense anymore. I grabbed the hospital documents. The first page contained a name. Not mine. A different name. One I had never seen before. Underneath it were 2 words that made my blood run cold. Biological mother. The woman in the photographs. I stared at the paper. Unable to breathe. Unable to think. Unable to process what I was seeing. The woman wasn't just connected to me. She wasn't just someone who looked like me. According to these documents, she was my mother. Footsteps suddenly echoed below. I froze. Someone was awake. My heart pounded violently. I quickly gathered the papers. Then I heard my father's voice from downstairs. Claire? The sound made my stomach drop. Had he discovered I was gone? Had he known exactly where I would look? I remained completely silent. The footsteps started climbing the attic stairs. One step. Then another. Then another. My father appeared in the doorway. The moment he saw the open box, all the color drained from his face. Neither of us spoke. We simply stared at each other. And in that silence, I finally got the answer I had been searching for. He knew. He had always known. The documents slipped from my trembling fingers and scattered across the floor. My father looked at them. Then at me. His eyes filled with sorrow. A sorrow so deep it almost scared me. Finally, he whispered the words that shattered my life forever. Claire. His voice broke. We were going to tell you someday. I stared at him. Tears filling my eyes. Tell me what? My father closed his eyes. And when he opened them again, the truth finally began to emerge. You were adopted. The world seemed to stop. Every sound vanished. Every thought disappeared. Only those 3 words remained. You were adopted. And somehow, deep inside, I knew that wasn't even the biggest secret. Not even close. Because hidden beneath the adoption papers was another document. One my father hadn't noticed yet. A document with a single handwritten note attached. A note that mentioned Lily. And the moment I read it, I realized the little girl who had called me mommy wasn't connected to me by coincidence. She was connected to me by blood. My father's words echoed through the attic. You were adopted. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I couldn't even think. 27 years. 27 years of family holidays, birthday celebrations, school graduations, scraped knees, bedtime stories, and every memory I had ever known. And now, in a single sentence, the foundation beneath all of it had cracked. Tears blurred my vision. I looked at my father. Then at the photographs scattered across the floor. Then at the documents in my trembling hands. Why? I whispered. My father lowered his head. The guilt on his face was impossible to miss. We were trying to protect you. I laughed bitterly. The sound didn't even feel like mine. Protect me? My voice rose. You lied to me my entire life. Claire. No. Years of confusion and betrayal exploded inside me. No more excuses. I pointed at the photographs. Who is she? My father looked toward the attic stairs. As if wishing he could escape. Instead, he slowly sat down on an old wooden trunk. For the first time, he looked completely defeated. Her name was Rachel. The name hit me like a shockwave. Rachel. The woman in Daniel's photograph. The woman who looked like me. The woman who might be my biological mother. The woman whose daughter had mistaken me for her own mother. Everything was somehow connected. I could feel it. What happened to her? Before my father could answer, another voice came from behind us. My mother. I'll tell her. I turned. She stood at the top of the attic stairs. Her eyes were red. Tears streaked her cheeks. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then she slowly walked toward us. She looked older than I had ever seen her. Not physically. Emotionally. Like someone carrying a burden for decades. She sat beside my father. And finally, began telling the truth. Rachel was my younger sister. I stared at her. The words took several seconds to register. Your sister? My mother nodded. I felt dizzy. That meant Rachel wasn't just my biological mother. She was my aunt's daughter. My mother's sister. My entire body went cold. Why have I never heard of her? My mother's eyes filled with fresh tears. Because after everything happened, our family erased her. The sentence sounded cruel. Heartless. But the pain in her voice told me it wasn't that simple. What happened? My mother looked at the old photographs. Then she took a shaky breath. Rachel got pregnant when she was 19. The room felt completely still. She refused to tell anyone who the father was. I frowned. What do you mean? We asked hundreds of times. My father answered. She never told anyone. My mother nodded. Not her parents. Not her friends. Nobody. The mystery deepened. Then what? My mother's hands trembled. When you were born, Rachel loved you more than anything. I looked at the baby photograph. The one taken on my birthday. The one showing Rachel holding me. A lump formed in my throat. For the first time, I wasn't looking at a stranger. I was looking at my mother. My real mother. The woman whose smile I had inherited. The woman whose eyes stared back at me from every photograph. What happened to her? The question barely came out. My mother looked away. And suddenly I knew the answer wouldn't be good. 3 seconds passed. 5. 10. Finally, she whispered. She disappeared. The attic seemed to tilt around me. My heart stopped. No. My mother nodded slowly. 3 months after you were born. The exact same word Daniel had used. Disappeared. Not died. Not left. Disappeared. The similarity hit me instantly. Rachel had disappeared. And Lily's mother had disappeared. The same woman. The same person. The realization crashed into me. I stood so quickly that several photographs slid off the box. Wait. My voice shook. Daniel told me Lily's mother disappeared 6 years ago. My parents exchanged a look. A look that terrified me. Because neither seemed surprised. Why aren't you shocked? I demanded. My mother's face crumbled. And then she said something that made my blood run cold. Because we knew Rachel was alive. Silence. Complete silence. I couldn't breathe. What? We knew. The words barely escaped her mouth. I stared at both of them. Trying to understand. Trying to process. Failing. You knew she was alive? My father nodded. Slowly. Reluctantly. The room spun. For 27 years, they had allowed me to believe nothing. To know nothing. Meanwhile, they had known my biological mother survived. They had known. The betrayal hit harder than the adoption itself. How? I whispered. My mother began crying openly. Because she came back. The words landed like a bomb. I felt physically ill. She what? She came back. My mother wiped her eyes. 12 years after she disappeared. I couldn't speak. Every answer seemed to create 10 more questions. Why didn't she take me? The question came out broken. Small. Painful. My mother's expression shattered. Because she knew exactly what I was asking. Why didn't my own mother come back for me? The answer terrified me. And apparently it terrified her too. Because she couldn't say it. Instead, my father answered. She tried. I froze. What? Rachel came back for you. The words echoed through the attic. My entire world collapsed. She had tried. My mother had tried. Then why wasn't I with her? Why hadn't I known her? Why hadn't she raised me? The answer arrived seconds later. And it was worse than anything I imagined. My mother lowered her head. We told her no. The silence that followed felt endless. I stared at her. Certain I had misheard. You, what? We told her no. The tears in her eyes offered no comfort. No justification. No excuse. Nothing. Just guilt. Raw guilt. 27 years of it. You kept me from her? My voice cracked. My father closed his eyes. My mother began sobbing. Neither denied it. Because they couldn't. The truth was sitting between us. Ugly and undeniable. My legs nearly gave out. I sat down hard on the floor. Every memory suddenly felt different. Every childhood birthday. Every Christmas. Every family photograph. All built on a decision that wasn't mine. A decision someone else had made. A decision that stole my chance to know my mother. Then another horrifying thought entered my mind. If Rachel came back. If Rachel later became Lily's mother. Then something impossible might be true. I grabbed the handwritten note from the pile. The one mentioning Lily. The one my father hadn't noticed. My hand shook as I unfolded it. The note was old. Yellowed with age. Written in hurried handwriting. Rachel's handwriting. At the bottom was a sentence that made my heart stop. If anything happens to me, tell Claire she has a sister. I read it twice. Then 3 times. The attic became silent. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Slowly, I looked up. My parents had gone pale. They had never seen the note. That much was obvious. And suddenly, a terrifying possibility emerged. A possibility that connected everything. Rachel. Lily. The disappearance. The resemblance. The photographs. The necklace. The note. My voice barely worked. When was this written? My mother stared at the paper. Then her face lost all color. It was written 7 years ago. 7 years. My pulse thundered. Lily was 6. The math was impossible to ignore. I looked at my parents. Then the note. Then back again. And for the first time, I spoke the question neither of them wanted to hear. Is Lily my sister? My mother burst into tears. My father looked away. Neither answered. But their silence told me everything. Because in that moment, I realized the truth was even bigger than I imagined. The little girl who had run across a grocery store calling me mommy might not simply be connected to me. She might be family. Real family. And somewhere out there, hidden beneath decades of lies, was a final truth nobody had been willing to face. A truth that would soon arrive in the form of a DNA test. A truth capable of destroying everything we thought we knew. Because the next morning, Daniel would call me. And what he revealed about Rachel's final days would change the entire investigation. Nothing about Rachel's disappearance was what it seemed. And someone had been lying from the very beginning. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rachel's face. The photographs. The note. The words my mother had spoken. We told her no. The sentence replayed over and over in my head. For 27 years, I had believed my life began with the people who raised me. Now I knew there had been another woman. A woman who had carried me. Loved me. Lost me. Found me again. And then lost me a second time. The thought was unbearable. Around 6 in the morning, my phone rang. I had barely slept an hour. The screen showed Daniel's name. My heart immediately started racing. Something told me this wasn't a casual call. I answered. Hello? Silence. Then Daniel's voice. Claire. Something was wrong. I could hear it instantly. What happened? Another pause. Then he said 4 words that made my stomach drop. I found another photograph. I sat upright. What photograph? I think you need to see it. His voice sounded strained. Almost frightened. Daniel, what is it? The silence stretched. Then. It's a picture of Rachel. I closed my eyes. Daniel, I already know Rachel was my biological mother. The line went completely silent. For several seconds neither of us spoke. What? I told him everything. The attic. The adoption. The photographs. The family secret. Rachel being my mother's sister. By the time I finished, Daniel sounded stunned. My God. I know. No, he whispered. You don't. The fear in his voice sent a chill through me. What aren't you telling me? Another long silence. Then he finally answered. The photograph wasn't just Rachel. My pulse quickened. Who else was in it? Daniel took a shaky breath. You. The room suddenly felt smaller. What? You were in the picture. I stopped breathing. That's impossible. That's what I thought. My hand tightened around the phone. How old was I? About 6. I nearly dropped the phone. 6 years old. Not a baby. Not an infant. 6 years old. The age was impossible. Because Rachel had supposedly disappeared when I was 3 months old. She couldn't have taken a photograph with me when I was 6. Unless someone had lied. Again. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up before he could answer. The drive to Daniel's house felt longer than the one to my parents' home. Every possibility raced through my mind. Maybe the photograph wasn't me. Maybe Daniel was mistaken. Maybe there was another explanation. But deep down, I already knew. There was always another secret. Another lie. Another missing piece. And I was getting closer to it. When I arrived, Daniel was waiting outside. His face looked exhausted. Like he hadn't slept either. Without a word, he led me inside. Lily was still asleep. The house was quiet. Daniel sat at the dining room table. A photograph rested between us. My heart pounded. Slowly, I picked it up. The air left my lungs. It was me. There was no doubt. I recognized the pink jacket immediately. I had seen it in dozens of childhood pictures. I was standing beside a woman. Rachel. Her arm wrapped around my shoulders. Both of us are smiling at the camera. A date was written on the back. I checked it 3 times. The same result every time. I had been 6 years old. My vision blurred. How? Daniel looked miserable. That's the question. My hands trembled. Where did you find this? It was hidden inside one of Rachel's storage boxes. The room fell silent. I stared at the photograph. My biological mother hadn't disappeared when I was 3 months old. At least not completely. Somehow she had seen me years later. Spent time with me. Taken photographs with me. And I remembered none of it. Not a single memory. Then another detail caught my eye. A man stood partially visible in the background. His face was blurry. Almost hidden. But something about him felt familiar. Very familiar. I looked closer. Then froze. No. Daniel frowned. What? I pointed. The man. The shape of his face. The posture. The jacket. I had seen him before. Many times. In family albums. At birthdays. At Christmas dinners. At graduation parties. The blurry figure looked exactly like my Uncle Peter. My mother's older brother. The room seemed to spin. Claire? I couldn't answer. Because if I were right, then Uncle Peter had known Rachel was alive. Which meant my parents weren't the only ones keeping secrets. The entire family might have been involved. And if that was true, the conspiracy went much deeper than adoption. Much deeper than lies. Someone had spent decades controlling the truth. The realization terrified me. Then Daniel pulled another document from a folder. This is what scared me. I looked down. It was a police report. An old one. Rachel's missing person case. At first nothing seemed unusual. Then I noticed a highlighted section. A witness statement. The witness claimed Rachel had been seen arguing with someone shortly before her disappearance. Someone she trusted. Someone she called family. My heartbeat accelerated. Who? Daniel looked directly at me. The name was removed from the report. A chill ran through me. Removed. Intentionally removed. Not forgotten. Not missing. Removed. Someone had protected that person's identity. Someone with influence. Or something to hide. Suddenly my phone buzzed. The sound startled both of us. I looked down. A text message. From my Uncle Peter. The timing alone made my stomach tighten. The message contained only one sentence. We need to talk. Today. Alone. I showed Daniel. His face immediately darkened. He knows. The same thought had already crossed my mind. But there was something else. Something even more disturbing. I hadn't spoken to Uncle Peter in nearly 4 months. We weren't especially close. Yet somehow, on the exact morning I discovered the photograph, he suddenly wanted to meet. That wasn't a coincidence. He knew something. Maybe he'd always known something. The question was how much. I called him immediately. He answered after the first ring. As if he'd been waiting. Claire. His voice sounded nervous. Very nervous. What do you know about Rachel? The silence that followed was devastating. Because innocent people answer questions. Guilty people hesitate. And Uncle Peter hesitated. For a long time. Finally, he sighed. I know more than I should. My pulse hammered in my ears. Then start talking. Not over the phone. Why? His answer sent ice through my veins. Because if I'm right about what's happening. His voice dropped to a whisper. Then Rachel didn't disappear. I froze. Daniel froze. Everything froze. What are you talking about? The line remained silent for several seconds. Then Uncle Peter spoke the words that changed everything. Rachel was hiding. I nearly dropped the phone. What? She was hiding from someone. Every muscle in my body tightened. The story was changing again. Rachel hadn't vanished. She hadn't abandoned anyone. She hadn't simply disappeared. According to Uncle Peter, she had been running. Running from someone dangerous enough to make her abandon her entire life. But who? And why? I asked the question immediately. Uncle Peter's answer came in a trembling whisper. Because she believed someone in our family was trying to kill her. The phone slipped from my hand. And as it hit the floor, I realized the DNA test results waiting at the laboratory might be the least shocking truth of all. Because the mystery was no longer about who Rachel was. The mystery was about who had spent 27 years making sure her secrets stayed buried. And why they were suddenly terrified that I was uncovering them now. My hands were still shaking long after the call ended. Rachel wasn't hiding from strangers. She wasn't hiding from criminals. According to Uncle Peter, she had been hiding from someone inside our own family. The idea sounded insane. Like something out of a movie. But then again, a month earlier I would have said the same thing about discovering I was adopted. Or finding out my biological mother was the same woman whose daughter had run across a grocery store calling me mommy. Nothing felt impossible anymore. Daniel and I sat in silence for several minutes. Neither of us knew what to say. Finally, he spoke. What if Peter is wrong? I looked at him. But neither of us believed that. Too many lies had already been exposed. Too many secrets had surfaced. Every time we uncovered one truth, another appeared underneath it. Like layers buried for decades. And somehow they all led back to Rachel. My biological mother. The woman nobody wanted me to know. The woman who had spent years trying to find me. The woman who had vanished twice. The first time of my life. The second time from everyone else's. Then my phone buzzed. A message from the DNA laboratory. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The results were ready. I stared at the screen. Part of me wanted answers more than anything. Another part was terrified. Because answers change things. Forever. Daniel looked at me. Is that it? I nodded. The room felt impossibly quiet. Slowly, I opened the email. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. The document loaded. Lines of text appeared. Percentages. Markers. Genetic matches. I struggled to focus. Then I found the conclusion. And everything stopped. Probability of biological relationship, 99.9998%. My breath caught. Daniel leaned closer. I continued reading. Then tears filled my eyes. Not because the result shocked me. Because it confirmed what my heart had already begun to suspect. Lily was family. Real family. But not in the way anyone expected. I reached the next section. The exact relationship determination. The words blurred for a moment. I blinked. Then read them again. And again. My hands began trembling uncontrollably. Daniel's face went pale. Because the DNA results revealed a truth none of us had considered. Lily wasn't my sister. She wasn't my daughter. She wasn't my cousin. According to the DNA report, Lily was my niece. The room became completely silent. I stared at the screen. Trying to process it. Trying to understand. A niece. Which meant only one thing. Rachel was her mother. And Lily's father wasn't connected to me biologically. The relationship existed entirely through Rachel. My biological mother. For several seconds, neither Daniel nor I spoke. Then his voice broke. Oh my God. I nodded slowly. The evidence was undeniable. Rachel had given birth to me. Years later, she had given birth to Lily. That meant Lily was my half-sister's daughter. No. I quickly corrected myself. If Rachel were both our mother, Lily would be my younger half-sister. But the report clearly stated niece. I kept reading. And suddenly realized why. The laboratory had included another comparison. One Daniel had secretly requested. A comparison between me and Rachel's preserved medical records. Records containing genetic material collected years earlier. The conclusion hit me like lightning. Rachel wasn't my biological mother. The woman everyone believed was my mother. She was actually my biological grandmother. I stared at the screen. Unable to move. Unable to breathe. Unable to comprehend what I was reading. Daniel looked equally stunned. The room felt unreal. The woman in the photographs. The woman I had spent weeks believing was my mother. The woman my family called Rachel. It was actually my grandmother. My biological grandmother. Which meant there was only one possible explanation. The child Rachel had been holding in those photographs wasn't her daughter. It was her granddaughter. Me. A horrifying realization exploded inside my head. Daniel. My voice barely worked. He looked at me. I felt sick. If Rachel wasn't my mother. His eyes widened. Because he had already reached the same conclusion. Then the truth emerged. Slow. Terrible. Unavoidable. My biological mother wasn't Rachel. My biological mother was someone else. Someone much closer. Someone hidden in plain sight. Suddenly, memories flashed through my mind. Childhood birthdays. Family gatherings. Christmas dinners. The way certain relatives always treated me differently. The strange tension I never understood growing up. The feeling that something wasn't being said. Then one face appeared. One person. One impossible answer. My mother. Not the woman who raised me. Her younger sister. Aunt Sarah. The aunt who had died when I was 7. The aunt nobody ever talked about. The aunt whose photographs mysteriously disappeared from family albums. My pulse exploded. No. But even as I said it, I knew. I knew. Because every clue suddenly fit. Sarah had been 19 when I was born. The exact age Rachel supposedly became pregnant. Someone had changed the story. Someone had altered the records. Someone had deliberately hidden Sarah's existence. Daniel stared at me. You think? I nodded. Tears streaming down my face. I think Sarah was my mother. The words felt impossible. Yet everything pointed to them. Everything. The hidden documents. The altered birth records. The erased photographs. The lies. All of it. Then my phone rang. Uncle Peter. Again. I answered immediately. Before he could speak, I asked. Was Sarah my mother? The silence lasted only 2 seconds. But it felt like forever. Then Peter began crying. Actually crying. And in that moment, I got my answer. Yes. The word shattered whatever remained of my old life. I closed my eyes. Tears poured down my face. 27 years. 27 years believing a lie. Sarah had been my mother. Rachel had been my grandmother. The adoption story had been fabricated. The records altered. The family history is rewritten. Everything changed. Everything. But Peter wasn't finished. Because the next words out of his mouth were even worse. Claire. His voice trembled. You still don't know the biggest secret. I felt my stomach drop. Of course there was another secret. There always was. What secret? Peter inhaled slowly. Then answered. The reason Sarah disappeared. I froze. My heart stopped. What do you mean disappeared? Peter sounded devastated. Because for the first time, he wasn't hiding anything. Sarah didn't die in an accident. The world tilted. My blood ran cold. Every story I had been told growing up claimed Sarah died in a car crash. A tragic accident. A family tragedy. Something no one could prevent. Now Peter was telling me that was another lie. The biggest lie yet. Then how did she die? Peter's answer came in a whisper. A whisper so quiet I almost didn't hear it. But I heard it. Every word. And those words changed everything. She was murdered. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. Daniel stared at me. I stared back. Neither of us could breathe. Because suddenly the mystery wasn't about adoption. It wasn't about DNA. It wasn't about Rachel. It wasn't even about Lily. The mystery was about a murder. A murder hidden for more than 20 years. A murder someone inside my own family had covered up. And somewhere buried beneath decades of lies was one final truth. The identity of the killer. A truth Uncle Peter was finally ready to reveal. And when he did, it would tear our family apart forever. The word echoed through my mind long after the call ended. Murdered. Not an accident. Not a tragedy. Not bad luck. Murdered. For 20 years, my family had told the same story. A rainy night. A car accident. A young woman gone too soon. Everyone had repeated it so many times that it became truth. Or at least the version of truth they wanted everyone to believe. Now I knew it was a lie. Just like the adoption. Just like Rachel's disappearance. Just like everything else. I sat at Daniel's dining table staring at nothing. The DNA report remained open on my phone. The proof of who I was. The proof of who Lily was. The proof that an ordinary trip to the grocery store had somehow uncovered decades of deception. Daniel finally broke the silence. What do we do now? I looked down at my trembling hands. For weeks, I had chased answers. Now I wasn't sure I wanted them anymore. Because every answer hurt. Every truth came with another betrayal. But there was no turning back. Not now. Not after everything. I called Uncle Peter again. This time, he answered immediately. Tell me everything. His voice sounded exhausted. Like someone who had carried a secret for far too long. I should have told the truth years ago. Then tell it now. There was a long pause. Then he began. The story he told changed my life forever. 28 years earlier, Sarah had fallen in love with a man named Michael. They planned to get married. They planned a future together. And then Sarah became pregnant. With me. At first, everything seemed normal. But according to Peter, Michael wasn't the man everyone believed him to be. He was controlling. Possessive. Dangerous. The relationship became toxic. Sarah eventually tried to leave. And that's when everything went wrong. One night, there was an argument. A violent one. Sarah called Rachel. Terrified. Crying. Begging for help. Rachel rushed to meet her. But she arrived too late. Sarah was already dead. I couldn't breathe. Tears streamed down my face. The woman who gave birth to me never got the chance to raise me. Never got the chance to watch me grow up. Never got the chance to tell me she loved me. Because someone took that future away from her. What happened to Michael? Peter's voice broke. Nothing. The answer hit me like a punch. What? Your grandparents were terrified. I closed my eyes. Already knowing where this was going. They covered it up. The room fell silent. Rachel knew the truth. Peter knew the truth. My grandparents knew the truth. And instead of exposing it, they buried it. They claimed Sarah died in an accident. They used family connections to keep questions from being asked. They protected the family's reputation. And in doing so, they erased Sarah's story. I felt sick. Absolutely sick. But Rachel knew. Yes. And she couldn't live with it. Exactly. Suddenly everything made sense. Rachel hadn't disappeared because she wanted to. She disappeared because she couldn't stay. She couldn't watch everyone pretend. She couldn't watch Sarah be forgotten. She couldn't watch the lie continue. So she left. And she took the truth with her. For years she moved from place to place. Starting over. Trying to survive. Trying to heal. Eventually she met Daniel. Eventually Lily was born. Eventually she built a new life. But the past never stopped chasing her. Then Peter revealed the final piece. The piece that explained everything. Including the grocery store. Including Lily. Including the moment that started it all. Rachel never stopped looking for you. The tears returned instantly. She didn't? No. Peter's voice trembled. Every year she asked about you. I covered my mouth. Trying not to cry. Failing. She kept photographs. Of me? Dozens. I completely broke down. For 27 years I had secretly wondered whether my biological family cared. Whether they thought about me. Whether they remembered me. Now I knew. Rachel had never forgotten. Not once. Peter continued. She told Lily stories about you. I froze. What? She showed Lily your pictures. My heart nearly stopped. Suddenly, the impossible became clear. The resemblance. The recognition. The certainty in Lily's eyes. The reason she ran toward me. The reason she called me mommy. She hadn't actually mistaken me for her mother. Not exactly. She had spent years looking at photographs of me, hearing stories about me, learning about me. Then one day she saw me standing in a grocery store. A face she recognized. A face connected to family. And in the excitement and confusion of being a child, she reached for the closest word she knew. Mommy. I closed my eyes. Finally, everything made sense. The mystery that had haunted me for weeks suddenly fit together. Every piece. Every clue. Every coincidence. There had never been a coincidence. Only a chain of truths waiting to be uncovered. Then I asked the question that remained. What happened to Rachel? The line became quiet. Very quiet. And somehow I already knew the answer wouldn't be easy. Peter took a long breath. Rachel died 2 years ago. The words shattered me. I lowered my head. Tears fell onto the table. All this time. All these weeks. All these questions. And I had missed her. By 2 years. 2 years. The woman who searched for me. The woman who kept my photographs. The woman who refused to forget me. Gone. I would never meet her. Never hear her voice. Never ask her questions. Never hug her. The loss felt unbearable. Then Peter said something that changed everything. She left something for you. My heart skipped. What? A letter. A week later, that letter arrived. I sat alone in my apartment holding the envelope. Rachel's handwriting covered the front. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter written years earlier. A letter meant for me. I read every word through tears. She told me she loved me. She told me none of what happened was my fault. She told me she had searched for me for years. She told me she hoped one day I would know the truth. And at the very end, she wrote a sentence I will never forget. If life is kind, it will bring us together again. And if it doesn't, I hope it sends you someone who will help you find your way home. I cried harder than I ever had in my life. Because somehow, in a way Rachel could never have predicted, life had done exactly that. It had sent Lily. Months passed. The family secrets became public. Relationships changed. Some never recovered. Others slowly healed. My parents apologized more times than I could count. Forgiveness didn't happen overnight. But eventually, healing began. Not because the lies disappeared, but because the truth finally existed. Danielle and I remained close. And Lily became a permanent part of my life. Every weekend she wanted to visit. Every visit included 100 questions. 100 stories. And 100 hugs. One afternoon, nearly a year after the grocery store incident, she sat beside me in the park watching ducks swim across a pond. Then she looked up at me. Are you happy now? The question caught me off guard. I smiled. Most days. She nodded thoughtfully. Then she slipped her small hand into mine. Grandma Rachel would be happy too. Tears filled my eyes again. But this time they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of peace. Because for the first time in my life, I finally knew who I was. I knew where I came from. I knew the people who loved me. And I knew the truth. The whole truth. As I sat there holding Lily's hand, I thought back to that ordinary Tuesday afternoon when I walked into a grocery store expecting nothing more exciting than buying apples for dinner. I had no idea that a little girl was about to run into my life. I had no idea she would unknowingly unravel decades of lies. I had no idea she would lead me to the family I never knew I had. Or help me uncover the story someone had spent more than 20 years trying to bury. But she did. And because of that single unexpected moment in a grocery store, a truth hidden for more than 20 years finally came to light, and my life was changed forever.